We are going to talk about our memorable players, our most memorable players from the Texas High School Football State Championship game. There are a lot of them, right? You had 12 games, 24 different teams. I've got a guy on my list that didn't win a title. That I'll remember. That these are guys that I think when we look back and inevitably, like for example, when I think of 2018, the guys that I'm going to think of are. I'm going to think of Haynes King. I'm going to think of Jordan Whittington.
Yes.
Those are probably the first two that are going to jump to my mind. When I think of 2017, I mean, sadly, I'm probably going to think of Matthew Baldwin from Lake Travis. Sadly, because of what happened in that Lake Travis game.
I'm going to think of Jalen Preston.
Jalen Preston, John Stephen Jones. Right? Guys like that. Who are those guys that when we, in a couple of years, when we look back, we're going to say, oh, those are the state championships with blank. So we've each got a list of 5. Ashley, you can go first. We're gonna put Ashley on the spot to do her rankings of the 5 players she is going to remember most from the state championship games.
All right. So first off, this was my first time working, obviously, the state championship. So
did you have a good time?
I did, actually. So the first one, I've got to give this out to you, and this is different. Hamlin didn't win, obviously, or anything like that, but Austin Lozano was probably like the most fun player we watched all weekend. I mean, Ish was up there within the booth with us the whole time. You were up there for a little bit, but like we were so pumped to see him play. He even at one point he punted the ball, or he set it for a kickoff and just bombed it, and we were going nuts in the booth. It was awesome. I loved watching him.
The big fella, the 300-pounder for Hamlin.
Exactly.
Awesome.
It was awesome.
I'm Lozano Hive. For sure.
Yeah.
I'm Lozano Hive.
It was just fun. He was.
And then remember when he blocked the field goal?
Yes.
He blocked the field goal.
And then he starts running
extra point.
And then, the extra point. And he starts running it back. And then he realizes he's not going to outrun the guy, so he just stops. He just stops and is like, let's just fight right here. He starts stiff-arming the guy.
That was awesome.
He knew he wasn't going to win the foot race. He's like, I just want to hit someone.
Let's go. Fine. Well, you want some? Let's go.
And so that was the thing.
Especially against Mart, where they've got like so many speedsters. Like, I'm not beating them 90 yards down the field. Let's just fight.
Yeah. And that's why, I mean, that's someone that I'm going to – it was one of the early on games, the younger guy, or, like the smaller schools, and it was so much fun to watch him. I don't think I'll ever forget that from a smaller perspective. All right, my number 4 is Carthage. We've got Kelvontay Dixon. I thought that he was just awesome.
God,
and I think the big thing was, too, he only had like 3 carries for 8 yards in the first quarter, and then after that he blew up. It was 7 catches for 120 yards. I mean, he did the thing that everyone knew that he could. So he was big up on my list.
Like it a lot?
Number 3, and you're going to have to remind me on the last name because I always messed it up. Dane, Frank Grandview.
Jentsch,
yeah. He was unbelievable.
The soft J.
Yeah, he was absolutely unbelievable. Obviously, just he was so good. Offensive and defensive MVP. His numbers were through the roof. And I always since I watched so many 6A games this year, I liked watching the smaller ones where the guys were just tearing it up on offense and defense. And for a quarterback to do that on offense and defense was really, I thought he was a hell of a player.
I like that.
Another small school. I liked Ben Crockett.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that he was one of those. He was almost to the point when we were talking about just watching him out there dominating, even from a 6A perspective. You look at him and you think, he could maybe play somewhere at the next level. Obviously, not a Power 5 or anything like that, maybe even a D2. But when you see a guy like that just completely running over people, you think, man, for us to be watching a 6A game or a 6-man game, and for him to be thinking, okay, he could play it for the next level. That was really impressive. And then this one I feel like is going to take people by surprise. But
number 1,
Fort Bend Marshall, Devon Achane. I thought that he was. I had never had the Devon Achane experience. I think obviously y'all had. Y'all had been hyping him up all year. I've seen the stats all year. But to be able to watch him in person, and I think the reason I'll remember him is when he goes on and plays at the next level and makes a big impact. It's going to be one of those things like, man, I'm so glad I got to watch him in person in high school, just running through people. So those would be my top 5.
I like that a lot. Good job.
Thank you.
That's a good list.
I like that.
Not my list, so it's not great, but it's fine.
Yeah.
Ish, you want to go next?
Oh yeah, mine. Okay.
So
let's see. I'm trying to figure out the order I sent it to Ashley in. Okay, here we go.
Yeah, here's 5 for you.
So my number 5 is Roddrell Freeman. at Mart.
Uh-huh.
Because it's not every year that we get to watch a guy who is FBS caliber at the 2A level. And usually when you do, he's usually a quarterback, right? Somebody who touches the ball every play and, things like that. Roddrell Freeman, he probably will be the quarterback next year, and he played quarterback last year, but he was the running back this year. And I believe he was the defensive lineman or linebacker this year on the other side of the ball. Man, that's just a guy who, when Hamlin was hanging around Mart, it was like, yeah, Freeman, all right, just take care of this. They just threw him the ball. I was like, yeah, get 10 yards, please. Just break away something, please. And you saw the physical difference of that's what the difference is between having a good two-way player and a good tech player in the state of Texas, right? And FBS level player. So Roddrell Freeman, for 2 years now, is kind of really impressed, and I can't wait to see what he's like as a senior.
Like that.
Number 4, Kyron Drones, Shadow Creek. Mm-hmm. This is a guy who I'd seen play. I saw him play Manor, and then I saw him a couple times on Texan Live, and it was always you saw it, but he never put it together for a full game. I never saw him put it together for a full game. And you saw the build, you saw his athleticism. You're like, man, that's a quarterback. If he puts it together, Shadow Creek's unstoppable. And granted, maybe I just caught him on bad games or inconsistent performances, and then he did against Denton Ryan. And he was hitting his passes early. He was running the ball really effectively, and you were like, "Oh yeah, this is a top level quarterback." And I believe he's a junior, so he still has one more year as well. So seeing him next year after he polishes up everything else, I hope I see what I saw in that Denton Ryan game for all of next season because he's going to be a player. He was really impressive. Number 3, I also have Kelvontay Dixon because we've never seen Waco La Vega. I've never seen Waco La Vega really struggle with one guy, right? Yes, we can talk about how Carthage kind of handled them up front and, kind of were able to salt the game away, but that game broke open because of Kelvontay Dixon. They 100%. Had no one who could stop him on the outside, and it was just a couple plays, just 3 touchdowns in the first half, and that was it. And they could just salt that game away for the entire second half, and I'd never seen Waco La Vega not be able to just handle someone like that. Number 2, I have Dane Jentsch.
Yes.
Back-to-back MVPs again for him. I mean, every game I've seen of him in person, he always comes up with a random interception. In addition to in addition for running and throwing for all these yards, it's is this he also play? Oh yeah, there's a pick right there. It's always that timely interception that either back breaks the other team or just seals the game in some way. When I saw him against Rockdale in the by-district round, he did the exact same thing. And so Dane Jentsch again for his second year. Number 1, I also have a little bit of surprise. Marcus Burris.
Oh,
Pleasant Grove.
I like that.
Man, we talk about Landon Jackson, right? Landon Jackson's obviously the more highly touted recruit, top 5-star athlete, I believe, going into 2021. But Marcus Burris is also the guy on that defensive line. And my goodness, he manhandled Wimberley. he had 2. I think he finished with 2 sacks. I think maybe half a tackle or something like that. But they couldn't block him at all. And that's the benefit. That's the kind of the compliment you get when you have both him and Landon Jackson, because you have to gamble. He's like, we got to double Landon Jackson. And it's like, cool. You're gonna single block Marcus Burris, who is the thunder to that lightning on the outside, and so he's gonna absolutely run through whoever you have. And he did that every play. Wimberley could not get their passing off the ground because Marcus Burris was in that backfield the entire time. I love it when defensive linemen dominate. Especially someone who's more brute strength than Marcus Burris, and he flashes some of his quickness as well. They're both back next year. Pleasant Grove is going to be a pain again, and so Marcus Burris, number 1 for me.
I would consider or relate him to Austin Lozano a little bit of our reaction to it.
It was like,
he was another one where we were like, I turn around and Ish would be like, oh my God, did you see that?
Yeah, it was pretty great. Okay. A very, very good list. Very good list.
Here we go.
In fact, we have some in common. Both of us.
Okay.
We did. Look, this is a unity moment. Unity.
Oh, God, get to it.
Number 5, Dane Jentsch.
Yeah.
And here's the funny thing. You know what I'm going to remember about Dane Jentsch? Dane Jentsch, the defender. I'm going to remember Dane Jentsch darting in on 4th and goal and coming up with the biggest defensive play of the game. He also had an interception. I believe he finished the year, his last 4 games, he had an interception. It's impressive. And obviously, look, he was the MVP on both sides, and then he gave his MVP award.
Offensive MVP to the running. I forgot the running back's name.
who had 5 touchdowns.
Tremaine
Gillette, yeah,
Yep.
Tremaine Gillette. And I think that was the right move.
Yeah,
I thought I thought Gillette was the best offensive player.
That is true.
Yes.
But Jentsch was the best defensive player. In any case, I will always remember watching him in this game. Number 4, Ben Crockett.
Mm-hmm.
Ben Crockett is a grizzly bear that they put pads on. He was awesome.
He's the reason. He's a big reason why that upset was so huge.
Yes,
because you were like, who's stopping Ben Crockett? Like how will they contain him?
And what impressed me most is that McLean is a team that fundamentally just likes to give the ball to him and he runs, right? If they run that kind of more tight formation. When they got down, they had to go into their spread formation, which is not their strong suit. But he made some throws, and he was terrific in that game. Ben Crockett, I'm always going to remember watching him at McLean. Number 3, another Pleasant Grove kid. I'm going to go with Bruce Garrett. Bruce. A guy who was nicked up all year long, and a guy who came through at the big moment for them when they needed it most against a Wimberley defense that played better than I expected them to. Mm-hmm. But he came through big, and what I'm going to remember about that is him scoring or him breaking a big run and it just being through there. So Bruce Garrett is going to be a guy that I remember. And especially, by the way, in a game where Ben Harmon was nicked up and could not throw, they had to run the ball, and he came through huge. So I'm going to remember Bruce Garrett. Number 2, Jase McClellan from Aledo, guys. A guy who is going to go down 3 titles. He played in 4 title games. He was the offensive MVP, I think, of 3 of them. Yeah, he was. He was as a freshman and then as a junior and a senior.
He won MVP against Cal Allen.
He was the offensive MVP for all 3 of those. And a guy who was not 100%, a guy who was playing
Which
hurt.
is insane to think about when you look at when you remember his game.
Yeah.
That was like 70%.
Yeah, but he was the guy that came through big for them in a game that, by the way, they needed every one of those scores against a very game Fort Bend Marshall team. But Jase McClellan, I'm always going to watch him kind of pulling away from a very fast Fort Bend Marshall defense. I'm going to remember him. But number 1, I guess maybe a surprise? How about Demetrius Davis from North Shore?
I was going to guess Davis.
Okay? Yeah. In a game that I think most people are going to remember for who wasn't there, right? They're going to remember that Jaquan Jackson didn't play, and they're going to remember maybe they're going to remember that Zach Evans didn't play, right? North Shore was in a dogfight against a very good, one of the best defenses we've ever seen in Duncanville. And yes, they had Roger Hagan and that big offensive line, but more importantly, they needed Davis to come through in a big, big way. He was their go-to guy, and he was the engine that drove that offense, whether it was running the ball or then making the throws he needed to, including the dagger, the dime that he dropped to Charles King. That I'm going to remember. What I'm going to remember most about that game, which of course had so much hype around it, partially due to us, the atmosphere, all those moments. Yeah, I'm going to remember that game for Demetrius Davis putting on the cape and being like, "This is my team. Yeah, don't forget it," and willing them to a second straight championship.
I think the best part about that performance from him was that we mentioned no Banks, no Evans, things like that. Last year we knew he was a dual threat quarterback, but last year he really got it done with his arm. Yes. Right? He didn't need to run the ball because they had Zach Evans, and
in a lot of ways they didn't let him. Like they were, you could tell they were like, we're going to pull back the reins.
But he was talented enough to where his arm was talented enough to where it was like, yeah, it's fine. Yeah, we don't need him to run. This year was like, okay, we're going to need you. Banks is down. We don't have anybody to stretch that field and to make that passing game as lethal as it was. So we're going to need you to do a little more running. And he was like, yeah, sure, let's do this. And
he did what the game asked him to do. Yeah. And he was awesome. So those are our 5 players. Which players are you going to remember? Let us know in the comments, and we will. I
think the one that we all 3 had was Dane Jentsch. That was the one that we all 3 put on our list.
Back-to-back years. I mean, him doing what he did.
But here's the thing. I think that the fact that all of our lists were different and all of us each had a player that nobody else had speaks to the depth of talent and how there were so many unforgettable moments and players from those
things that stood out to each of us.
Exactly. I think that speaks to the breadth of talent that we saw there at AT&T Stadium. So those are the players we're going to remember most from state championship games.